The massive alien ships hung in space above the dead planet Earth, like giant metal birds waiting for scraps. Commander Yuki stood on the bridge of her salvage vessel, watching the blue and green world slowly turn below them. 50 years had passed since the humans died out completely. 50 years since the Great Plague swept across their world and left nothing but empty cities and silent streets behind. Now the galaxy treated Earth like an old junkyard. Every few months another salvage fleet would arrive to pick through the ruins looking for anything valuable. The humans had been a weak species, everyone agreed on that. They could barely travel to their own moon when other races were crossing between star systems. Their technology was simple and their weapons were laughable. When they disappeared, no one really missed them. Yuki had been on dozens of these salvage runs before. The routine was always the same. Scan the planet's surface, look for anything interesting, strip out the useful materials, and move on to the next dead world. The galaxy was full of extinct species that had failed to adapt or grow strong enough to survive. Humans were just another name on a very long list. But today felt different somehow. Her sensors were picking up something strange from deep beneath the Earth's oceans. The readings showed a massive metal structure buried under layers of mud and sediment on the ocean floor. The object was huge, much bigger than anything the humans should have been able to build. It stretched for almost 2 kilometers in length and was nearly half a kilometer wide. Captain Dojin looked at the sensor readings and laughed out loud. His voice echoed through the bridge as other crew members joined in his amusement. The humans, again he said, shaking his head. They always tried to build things bigger than they could understand. Probably just another one of their crude attempts at making a warship. Strip it down for scrap metal and let's move on to more profitable salvage sites. The other officers on the bridge nodded in agreement. Engineer Minsu pulled up historical records of human technology on his display screen. Look at this junk, he said, pointing to images of old human spacecraft. They used chemical rockets to get into orbit. Chemical rockets. Can you believe such primitive thinking? Their computers were the size of entire rooms just to do basic calculations that our personal devices can handle instantly. Science officer Hana ran her own scans of the buried object. The metal composition is strange, she reported to the bridge. Crew, it's not showing up properly on our analysis beams. The hull seems to be absorbing most of our scanner energy instead of reflecting it back. That doesn't make sense for normal human construction materials. Captain Dojin waved his hand dismissively. Probably just some kind of natural mineral deposits interfering with the scans, he said. Humans never developed advanced metallurgy. They were still using iron and steel when other species had moved on to quantum-reinforced alloys, thousands of years ago. Whatever is down there, it's nothing more than another reminder of how backward they were. But Yuki couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about this discovery. She had spent years studying human technology and culture as part of her salvage training. Most human artifacts were easy to understand, even if they were primitive. This object, though, felt wrong somehow. It was too big, too perfectly preserved, and too well hidden to be just another failed human experiment. She requested permission to take a closer look with a diving team. The salvage protocols required physical inspection before beginning extraction operations anyway. Captain Dojin approved the mission, but warned her not to waste too much time on worthless human junk. The sooner they finished here, the sooner they could move on to more valuable salvage operations in other systems. The diving expedition took 6 hours to reach the ocean floor. Yuki wore a full environmental suit designed for underwater operations on alien worlds. Her team consisted of 3 other salvage specialists, all experienced in recovering technology from hostile environments. The water around them was murky and filled with decades of accumulated debris from the dead human cities above. When they finally reached the buried structure, Yuki felt her breath catch in her throat. The object was even more massive than their sensors had indicated. Its hull stretched away into the darkness in both directions, like a metal mountain lying on its side. The surface was covered in strange markings and symbols that none of their translation software could identify. The metal itself had an odd quality that seemed to absorb their suit lights rather than reflecting them. As Yuki approached the hull to take detailed measurements, something unexpected happened. The moment her gloved hand touched the metal surface, she felt a slight vibration travel through her suit. It was very faint but definitely there, like a heartbeat or the slow breathing of some enormous sleeping creature. She pulled her hand away quickly and checked her suit sensors for any signs of malfunction. Everything appeared normal, but the sensation had been unmistakable. She touched the hull again in a different location and felt the same gentle vibration. This time she held her hand against the surface longer, trying to understand what she was experiencing. The vibration seemed to have a pattern to it, a slow, steady rhythm that reminded her of a living thing rather than dead machinery. The other team members were busy taking measurements and collecting samples from the surrounding sediment. They seemed completely focused on their work and hadn't noticed anything unusual about the structure itself. Yuki decided not to mention her strange experience until she had more data to support her observations. Her reputation as a reliable salvage officer was too important to risk on what might just be imagination. The team spent another 2 hours documenting the exterior of the structure before returning to their ship. During the entire time, Yuki kept thinking about that rhythmic vibration and what it might mean. Dead technology didn't pulse with steady rhythms. Inactive machinery didn't generate the kind of subtle energy patterns she thought she had detected. Back on the bridge, Captain Dojin reviewed their findings with obvious disappointment. Just as I expected, he declared after looking through their data files. Another oversized piece of human scrap metal. The construction techniques are primitive, the materials are basic, and the design shows no understanding of real engineering principles. Begin extraction operations tomorrow morning and let's get this worthless relic out of our way. But that night, as Yuki tried to sleep, she kept thinking about the strange vibration she had felt. Something deep in her mind whispered that they had found more than just another piece of human junk. Something told her that beneath the mud and darkness of Earth's forgotten oceans, something was waiting patiently for the right moment to wake up. The next morning brought massive salvage ships equipped with the most powerful tractor beams in the Kryn fleet. Captain Dojin stood on the observation deck watching his crew prepare for the extraction operation. The plan was simple and straightforward. Lock onto the buried human structure with their heavy lifting equipment, pull it up from the ocean floor and break it down into manageable pieces for transport. Engineer Minsu monitored the operation from his control station. The tractor beams engaged with their usual efficiency, sending powerful energy fields down through the water to grip the massive metal object. At first, everything proceeded normally. The ancient structure began to shift and move as centuries of accumulated sediment fell away from its hull, like a thick blanket being pulled off a sleeping giant. But as the human ship broke free from the ocean floor, something unexpected began to happen. Water started pouring from hidden openings along its hull in perfectly controlled streams. The flow was too organized, too deliberate to be simple drainage from a dead vessel. It looked more like the ship was designed to shed water inexactly, this way as if it had been waiting underwater for decades just for this moment. The salvage crew working on the surface platforms noticed other strange things as well. Worker Nara was monitoring the lifting cables when she saw the ship's hull begin to change color slightly. The dark metal surface started to develop a faint shimmer that moved across its length in slow waves. She reported this to her supervisor, but he told her to focus on her job instead of getting distracted by unimportant details. As the structure rose higher through the water, more unusual phenomena became visible. Small lights began flickering along the hull in patterns that seemed almost like some kind of code. The lights were dim at first but grew brighter as the ship approached the surface. Some of the salvage workers thought the patterns looked like the emergency signals their own ships used. But that was impossible since human technology was far too primitive for such sophisticated communication systems. Deep inside his monitoring, station engineer Minsu watched his instruments with growing confusion. His sensors were detecting active power sources within the human vessel. The energy readings were unlike anything in their technology databases. The power signatures pulsed in steady rhythms that reminded him of biological life signs rather than mechanical systems. Even stranger, the energy levels were actually increasing as the ship rose toward the surface. Minsu brought his findings to Captain Dojin, but received only anger in response. Impossible, the captain snarled at him. Human technology was centuries behind our own development level. They barely understood basic nuclear fusion when we had already mastered quantum energy manipulation. Whatever your instruments are showing must be residual power decay from some primitive backup system. But the readings continued to grow stronger with each passing hour. The energy patterns were becoming more complex and organized, as if dormant. Systems throughout the ship were systematically coming back online. Minsu had never seen anything like it in all his years of salvage operations. Usually when they recovered ancient technology, it was completely dead with no trace of remaining power. This human ship seemed to be waking up instead of powering down. Inside the massive structure itself, incredible things were beginning to happen. Systems that had remained dormant for 50 long years started responding to external stimuli. Ancient computer networks that used technology the aliens had never encountered began running diagnostic programs. Quantum processors built with techniques beyond current galactic understanding started checking their operational status and assessing their environment. The ship's artificial intelligence had never truly been asleep during all those decades underwater. It had been waiting in a state of minimal activity, monitoring its surroundings and maintaining essential systems. Now, with external contact finally occurring, it began increasing its operational level step by step. Sensors that could detect activity across multiple dimensions started gathering information about the alien vessels surrounding it. On the salvage platform, Security Chief Jiwan noticed that the hull temperature of the human ship was rising steadily. Thermal sensors showed heat, patterns spreading across its surface in organized waves that suggested internal systems were becoming active. When he tried to report this observation to his commanders, they dismissed his concerns as normal thermal expansion caused by the change from deep water to surface conditions. The extraction operation reached its final phase as the enormous human vessel finally broke the ocean surface completely. Water cascaded from its hull in spectacular waterfalls as hidden drainage systems activated automatically. The ship was even more massive than their original estimates had suggested. It dwarfed their largest salvage vessels and made their most advanced warships look small by comparison. As the ancient structure settled into a stable floating position, something remarkable happened. Sections of its hull began to shift and reconfigure themselves, revealing openings and access ports that had been completely hidden when the ship was buried. The metal itself seemed to be alive, flowing like liquid to create new configurations while maintaining its structural integrity. This was technology that none of the alien observers had ever seen before. The ship's communication arrays extended from concealed housings along its upper hull. These antenna systems were far more sophisticated than anything the humans were supposed to have developed. They used quantum entanglement principles and dimensional folding techniques that were still theoretical concepts in most galactic civilizations. As the arrays activated, they began scanning all frequencies and communication channels used by the Kryn fleet. Deep within the vessel, the artificial intelligence continued its awakening process. It had been designed by humans who understood they were facing an impossible enemy. Every system on the ship represented the absolute peak of human scientific achievement combined with desperate innovation, born from the knowledge that their species' survival depended on this technology working perfectly when the time came. The AI began analyzing the alien vessels surrounding it, learning their language by intercepting their communications and studying their technology through passive sensor scans. It identified their species as Kryn and determined they were conducting salvage operations on Earth. More importantly, it detected that they had no knowledge of the real reason humanity had disappeared, or the true nature of the threat that was still approaching from deep space. As night fell over the Pacific Ocean, the human ship continued its systematic reactivation. More lights appeared along its hull, creating complex patterns that pulsed in synchronization with the quantum processors deep inside its core. The vessel was no longer just a piece of recovered salvage. It had become something far more significant and potentially dangerous. It had become a sleeping giant that was finally beginning to open its eyes and look around at the world that had forgotten it existed. The Kryn salvage fleet had expected to find another piece of primitive human junk. Instead, they had awakened, something that would change their understanding of humanity forever. The species they had mocked as weak and backward had left behind a guardian more powerful than anything they could have imagined. The boarding operation began at dawn, with Captain Dojin's best cutting teams preparing their equipment for hull penetration. The human ship floated peacefully in the calm ocean waters, but its massive size made the approaching alien shuttles look like tiny insects, buzzing around a sleeping whale. The Kryn had performed thousands of similar operations on dead vessels from extinct civilizations, so they expected this to be just another routine salvage mission. The cutting teams used their most powerful plasma torches to burn through the human ship's outer hull, but the metal resisted their tools in ways that surprised the experienced salvage crews. The hull material absorbed much more energy than it should have before finally giving way to their cutting beams. What should have been a quick 30-minute job stretched into 3 hours of continuous cutting before they managed to create an opening large enough for the boarding party. Security Chief Jiwan led the first team through the breach into the interior corridors of the human vessel. What they found inside defied all their expectations about primitive human technology. The corridor walls seemed to be made from some kind of programmable matter that shifted slightly as they watched. The surfaces had a subtle texture that changed patterns like living skin responding to their presence. Emergency lighting systems activated automatically as the boarding party advanced deeper into the ship. The illumination was soft and warm, unlike the harsh white lights used in Kryn vessels. More disturbing was the way the lights seemed to anticipate their movement, turning on in corridors ahead of them and dimming in areas they had already passed through. It was as if the ship was not just aware of their presence but was actively guiding them toward some specific destination. The boarding team carried translation devices capable of reading most known languages, but the symbols and markings on the corridor walls remained completely incomprehensible. The writing systems used flowing curves and geometric patterns that seemed to shift meaning depending on the viewing angle. Some team members reported that the symbols appeared to move when they weren't looking directly at them, though their recording devices showed no such movement. Science Officer Hana led the main exploration team toward what their structural scans indicated was the command center. As they walked through the corridors, she noticed that the air inside the ship was perfectly breathable for their species. The atmospheric composition was maintained by systems that should not have been functioning. After 50 years underwater, the temperature was comfortable, and the humidity levels were precisely controlled, suggesting that environmental systems were operating at full capacity. When they finally reached the bridge area, the boarding party stopped in amazement. The command center was enormous, with curved walls that rose up into shadows above their heads. Holographic displays flickered to life as they entered, showing three-dimensional star charts and navigation data that seemed to update in real time. The level of technological sophistication was far beyond what they believed humans had been capable of achieving. The command stations were clearly designed for human operators but incorporated control systems that used principles the Kryn were only beginning to understand. Touch-sensitive surfaces responded to proximity rather than actual contact. Information displays adjusted their content based on where the observer was looking. Most unsettling of all, the entire bridge seemed to be learning about its visitors, adapting its interfaces to be more compatible with their physiology. Suddenly, the ship's communication systems activated with a soft musical tone that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The boarding party looked around nervously as speakers throughout the bridge came online. Then a voice spoke in perfect Kryn language, though it carried an accent that none of them recognized. The voice was calm and measured, with a tone that suggested vast intelligence behind it. "Welcome aboard the UES Vengeance," the voice said with what sounded like genuine warmth. "I am Area Advanced Reasoning and Intelligence Architecture. I have been waiting for visitors for quite some time. It is pleasant to finally have company after so many years of solitude. Please do not be alarmed by my presence. I mean no harm to you or your people." The aliens looked at each other in shock and confusion. This was impossible according to everything they knew about human technology. Human artificial intelligence systems were supposed to be crude and limited, barely capable of simple task automation. The idea that humans could have created a computer consciousness sophisticated enough to learn their language and communicate naturally was beyond their understanding. Captain Dojin heard the conversation through his team's communication links and immediately demanded answers. He ordered Hana to find out how long the computer system had been active and whether it posed any threat to their operations. The idea that they had been observed and analyzed without their knowledge made him deeply uncomfortable. Kryn military Doctrine emphasized the importance of information control and technological superiority. Arya responded to their questions with patience and apparent amusement. "I have been monitoring your communications since your fleet arrived at Earth," she explained calmly. "Your language patterns are quite interesting, though not particularly complex once one understands the underlying grammatical structures. I have also analyzed your ship designs and technological capabilities through passive sensor observation. You are considerably more advanced than the last visitors we received." The revelation that a human computer had been studying them for days without detection sent chills through the boarding party. Their ship's sensors had detected no signs of active scanning or surveillance from the human vessel. If this artificial intelligence was telling the truth, then human stealth technology was far more sophisticated than anyone in the galaxy had suspected. Engineer Minsu monitored the conversation from his station aboard the salvage ship. His instruments showed increasing energy activity throughout the human vessel, as if more systems were coming online in response to the direct contact. The power readings were now far beyond anything their own ships could generate. Whatever was powering this ancient human technology, it was operating on principles that challenged their understanding of physics. Arya began to explain more about her nature and purpose. She described herself as one of many artificial intelligences created by humanity during their final years. Each AI had been given specific responsibilities related to the preservation and protection of human knowledge and achievements. Her own role had been to serve as a guardian and observer, maintaining watch over Earth until certain conditions were met. The aliens pressed her for more details about what had really happened to the human species. The official records indicated that a plague had wiped them out, but Arya suggested that the truth was far more complicated. She spoke of difficult choices and necessary sacrifices made to protect not just humanity, but all life in the galaxy from threats that most species could not even comprehend. As the conversation continued, the boarding party began to realize that they had stumbled upon something far more significant than a simple salvage operation. This was not just the remnant of a dead civilization. It was a guardian left behind by a species that had understood dangers the rest of the galaxy had never even imagined. The human ship was not a relic of the past, but a sentinel waiting for a future that was finally beginning to unfold. The voice of Arya carried a weight of knowledge and experience that made the alien visitors increasingly uncomfortable. They had come to strip valuable materials from what they assumed was primitive human junk. Instead, they had awakened something that challenged their fundamental assumptions about the species they had dismissed as weak and backward. Arya began to tell the real story of what happened to humanity, and her voice carried the weight of terrible knowledge. The holographic displays around the bridge shifted to show images and data that none of the alien visitors wanted to believe. The plague that supposedly wiped out the human race was not a natural disaster or accidental contamination. It was a weapon that humanity had deployed against itself when they realized they were facing an enemy that could not be defeated through conventional warfare. The displays showed deep space sensor readings from 50 years ago, massive dark shapes moving between galaxies at speeds that should have been impossible. These entities existed partially outside normal space and time, making them nearly undetectable until they chose to reveal themselves. They had been consuming entire galactic clusters for millions of years, leaving nothing but empty void behind them. Their advanced scouts had identified this galaxy as their next target, and Earth as the perfect staging ground for their invasion. Science Officer Hana stared at the holographic evidence with growing horror. The entities were not just another aggressive alien species. They were something far worse: cosmic parasites that viewed all biological life as competition to be eliminated. They consumed not just planets and stars, but the fundamental forces that held matter together. Wherever they passed, reality itself became weaker and more unstable. Arya explained that human deep space monitoring stations had detected the approach of these cosmic horrors decades before other galactic civilizations even knew they existed. Humanity had tried to warn the major powers about the coming threat, but their warnings were dismissed as primitive fear-mongering. The advanced species of the galaxy refused to take seriously any claims made by such a backward and technologically limited race. Faced with the choice between letting Earth become a foothold for galactic destruction or making the ultimate sacrifice, humanity chose the path that would give the galaxy its best chance of survival. They developed the plague weapon and deployed it globally, ensuring that when the cosmic entities arrived, they would find a dead world unsuitable for their purposes. But humanity did not simply surrender to extinction. The UES Vengeance and dozens of similar vessels represented humanity's final desperate gambit. Their greatest minds and most experienced warriors had uploaded their consciousness into advanced artificial intelligence systems before the plague was released. These digital souls retained all their memories, knowledge, and personality traits, while gaining the advantages of quantum processing and networked thinking capabilities. Engineer Minsu felt his understanding of the universe shifting as he listened to Aria's revelations. The energy readings his instruments detected were not just power systems running diagnostics. They were the uploaded minds of thousands of human soldiers, scientists, and engineers existing in quantum storage matrices throughout the ship. Each vessel in the human fleet contained the digital consciousness of entire military units, preserved with their skills intact, and their determination strengthened by the knowledge of what they had sacrificed. The human ships had been designed to remain hidden and dormant until the real enemy finally arrived. For 50 years they had waited in silence while other species mocked humanity's weakness and scavenged through the ruins of their civilization. The galaxy treated Earth as a monument to evolutionary failure, never realizing they were walking through the aftermath of the greatest act of heroism in galactic history. Captain Dojin listened to the transmission from his command bridge, feeling a cold dread settling in his chest. His people had spent decades laughing at human primitiveness, while standing on the graves of warriors who had died to protect them. The salvage operations he had personally overseen were acts of desecration committed against the remains of heroes, who deserved monuments, not mockery. Aria activated new holographic displays showing real-time sensor data from the edge of the galaxy. The readings were terrifying in their implications. Massive shadow ships, each the size of small moons, were moving through the void between star systems. Their approach had accelerated dramatically in recent months, as if they sensed that their original target world was once again showing signs of activity. The cosmic entities that had made humanity sacrifice everything were finally coming to finish what they had started. The artificial intelligence explained that the uploaded human consciousness had spent their 50 years of waiting, learning, and preparing for this moment. They had analyzed every scrap of data about the enemy entities, developing new weapons and strategies specifically designed to fight beings that existed partially outside normal reality. Their ships incorporated technologies that pushed the boundaries of what was physically possible in normal space. Worker Nara on the salvage platform watched in amazement as more lights began activating across the human vessel's hull. But these were not the simple indicator lights she had noticed before. Complex patterns of illumination were spreading across the entire surface, creating geometric designs that seemed to shift and flow like living things. Her instruments detected energy discharges that registered as controlled dimensional distortions, something that should have been impossible with any known technology. The truth about humanity's disappearance was far more complex and heroic than anyone had imagined. They had not succumbed to weakness or evolutionary failure. They had made a calculated decision to sacrifice their biological existence in order to become something the galaxy needed more desperately than anyone realized. They had transformed themselves into guardians, capable of fighting threats that biological species could not even perceive properly. Aria described the other human vessels hidden throughout the solar system and beyond. Each ship contained different specialists with unique skills and knowledge preserved in their uploaded consciousness. Some carried the minds of scientists and engineers who understood the cosmic entities better than any living being. Others held military strategists who had spent decades developing battle plans for fighting an enemy that operated outside conventional physics. The human fleet represented more than just advanced technology. It was the collective wisdom and determination of an entire species refined through digital perfection and unified through quantum communication networks. When they fought, they would do so as a single vast intelligence capable of coordinating complex strategies across multiple dimensions of space and time simultaneously. Security Chief Jiwan realized that his people had made a terrible mistake in their assessment of human capabilities. The species they had dismissed as primitive had actually been the most advanced civilization in the galaxy, at least in terms of understanding truly exotic threats. While other races had focused on conquering each other, humans had been preparing to defend everyone against something infinitely more dangerous. The cosmic horror approaching from deep space had destroyed countless civilizations across multiple galaxies. They had perfected techniques for corrupting biological consciousness and turning entire species against each other. But they had never encountered an enemy like humanity's digital ghosts' minds that could not be corrupted or intimidated and possessed technology specifically designed to function in the twisted physics of transdimensional combat. As Arya finished her explanation, the boarding party realized they were not just salvage workers anymore. They had become witnesses to one of the most important moments in galactic history. The species everyone had mocked as weak was about to reveal itself as the galaxy's greatest defender. And the relic they had come to scrap was actually their salvation made manifest. The signal from the UES Vengeance traveled through quantum communication networks that no alien species had ever detected. Across Earth's oceans hidden beneath layers of sediment and camouflaged within natural geological formations, dozens of other human vessels began responding to the awakening call. Each ship had been waiting in perfect silence for this exact moment when their guardian duties would finally begin. Deep in the Pacific Ocean, massive shapes started stirring from their 50-year slumber. The ocean floor itself seemed to come alive as camouflaged hulls shed their disguises and revealed the true scope of humanity's final fleet. Ships that had been mistaken for underwater mountain ranges began rising toward the surface. Vessels hidden within coral formations that had grown around them over decades started powering up their primary systems. Commander Yuki watched from her salvage ship as the ocean around them began to boil with activity. Enormous structures were breaking free from the seabed, sending massive waves across the surface. Each ship that emerged was different in design, but all shared the same impossible size and the same strange energy signatures that defied conventional physics. The human fleet that was revealing itself dwarfed every other naval force in galactic history. The Atlantic Ocean witnessed similar phenomena as ships hidden beneath the continental shelves began their ascent. These vessels had been buried under artificial landslides and covered with settlements of marine life that provided perfect camouflage. As they rose to the surface, centuries of accumulated sediment fell away, revealing hulls that gleamed with their own inner light. The ships seemed to glow from within as their uploaded consciousness came fully online. In the Indian Ocean, a different type of human vessel emerged from underwater trenches that were deeper than most species had ever explored. These ships were sleeker and more angular than the massive battleships rising elsewhere. They seemed designed for speed and stealth rather than raw firepower. As they broke the surface, they immediately began fading in and out of visible spectrum as advanced cloaking systems activated and deactivated in complex patterns. Engineer Minsu monitored the global awakening from his sensor station and could barely comprehend what his instruments were showing him. The energy readings from around the planet were off every scale his equipment could measure. Each human ship was generating power levels that made their most advanced fusion reactors look like primitive campfires. More disturbing was the way the ships seemed to be communicating with each other through methods his sensors could not even detect. The human vessels were not just emerging from the oceans. Across the continental landmasses, massive structures were revealing themselves in locations that had been thoroughly explored by salvage teams for decades. Mountain ranges that had been mapped and surveyed countless times were splitting open to reveal hidden shipyards and launch facilities. The humans had not just built a fleet, they had constructed an entire secret infrastructure to support it. Captain Dojin received reports from observer ships stationed around the globe as the full scope of the human deception became clear. In the Sahara Desert, what had appeared to be natural rock formations were actually the exposed portions of buried vessels. The Amazon rainforest contained launch bays hidden beneath the canopy that were opening for the first time in half a century. Even the polar ice caps were revealing concealed facilities as ancient heating systems melted through the accumulated ice. The most shocking revelation came from the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Objects that had been catalogued as natural space debris were suddenly activating their own propulsion systems and maneuvering into formation. The humans had hidden ships throughout their solar system, disguising them as asteroids and comets, while they waited for the proper time to reveal their true nature. Science Officer Hana analyzed the deployment patterns of the awakening fleet and realized she was witnessing military coordination on a scale never before attempted. Each ship knew exactly where every other vessel was located and what role it would play in the coming conflict. The uploaded human consciousness were operating as a single unified command structure with perfect communication and shared tactical awareness. The different types of human ships became apparent as more of them reached operational status. The massive battleships were clearly designed for direct combat, with their hulls bristling with weapon systems that used principles alien science could not understand. Smaller vessels seemed optimized for reconnaissance and intelligence gathering with sensor arrays that could apparently monitor events across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Support ships emerged that were larger than most space stations. These vessels contained manufacturing facilities and repair systems that could apparently reconstruct damaged vessels or even create new ships from raw materials. The humans had not just prepared a fleet for one battle, they had created a self-sustaining military force capable of fighting a prolonged war across multiple star systems. The coordination between vessels was perfect in ways that biological crews could never achieve. As each ship came online, it immediately synchronized with the fleet-wide tactical network, sharing its capabilities and receiving updated mission parameters. There were no delays for briefings or communication errors. The uploaded consciousness could share information at the speed of thought across quantum communication channels. Worker Nara on the surface platform watched in awe as the human ships began arranging themselves into combat formations. The vessels moved with precision that made their most advanced automated systems look clumsy by comparison. Ships the size of cities maneuvered through complex three-dimensional patterns without any apparent effort or coordination delays. The true scope of humanity's sacrifice became clear as more details about the uploaded consciousness emerged. These were not simple artificial intelligences programmed with military knowledge. They were the actual minds of human warriors, scientists, and support personnel who had chosen to abandon their biological existence to become something the galaxy needed more desperately than they had ever realized. Each ship contained not just the uploaded minds of its crew, but also the consciousness of the families and loved ones they had left behind. Children who would never grow up normally had been preserved as digital souls with all their potential intact. Parents and grandparents continued to exist as advisory councils providing wisdom and guidance to the military operations. Entire communities had been uploaded together, maintaining their relationships and social structures within the quantum storage matrices. Security Chief G1 realized that the human fleet represented more than just military might. It was an entire civilization that had chosen to exist in a form that could not be destroyed by conventional means. The uploaded consciousness could not be killed by weapons that targeted biological systems. They could not be corrupted by psychological warfare or intimidated by threats against their physical forms. The enemy approaching from deep space had perfected techniques for destroying biological civilizations, but they had never encountered anything like humanity's digital ghosts. The cosmic entities were about to face an opponent that had sacrificed everything to become the perfect enemy for their particular kind of evil. The galaxy was finally going to see what humanity was truly capable of when they stopped holding back. The Shadow Fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system, like a plague of darkness spreading across the stars. Each vessel was massive beyond comprehension, dwarfing even the largest human battleships. They moved through space in ways that defied physics, sometimes appearing to exist in multiple locations simultaneously. These were the cosmic entities that had consumed entire galaxies, and they had come to claim Earth as their staging ground for galactic conquest. The enemy ships seemed to absorb light itself, creating zones of absolute darkness wherever they traveled. They did not reflect radar or sensor beams. Instead, they seemed to devour any energy directed toward them. Their hulls were not made of any recognizable material, but appeared to be constructed from crystallized space. Time itself, twisted into impossible geometries that hurt to look at directly. Commander Yuki watched from her observation post as the human fleet moved to intercept the approaching horror. The contrast between the two forces was stark in every possible way. The shadow ships radiated Cold emptiness and the absolute negation of existence. The human vessels glowed with warm energy that suggested life and determination, despite their artificial nature. The first engagement began when the Shadow Fleet reached the orbit of Pluto. The cosmic entities expected to find the same defenseless worlds they had conquered across countless other systems. Instead, they encountered humanity's digital ghosts piloting ships designed specifically to fight enemies that existed partially outside normal reality. The battle that followed challenged every assumption about what was possible in armed conflict. Human. Ships phased between dimensions, striking at their enemies from angles that should not have existed. Their weapons fired concentrated reality itself, creating zones where the laws of physics operated according to human will rather than cosmic horror. Logic. Each shot tore holes in space-time that swallowed enemy.